The following program is brought to you by Fanbags Cornhole, Chicago's official supplier of professional cornhole boards and bags. Choose from any of their officially licensed designs or have my boy Brian design a custom set using anything from a selfie to your company's logo. Visit www.fanbagscornhole.com and use the promo code BRAGS to get 10% off your entire order. That's www.fanbagscornhole.com and use the promo code BRAGS for 10% off. Step up your game with Fanbags Cornhole.
I'm Sasha Stefanovic, former Purdue men's basketball guard, and you're watching Boilers in the Stands.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is Braggs in the Stands, and I am your host, Gregory Braggs Jr. Alongside me, as always, is our guys, Joe Jackson and Aidan Kunst. Kraig Bowers will be joining us here shortly, just getting things rolling because we know Super Bowl is getting close. Unfortunately, it was Northwestern's Super Bowl here today at Evanston, Illinois, the first time the Northwestern Wildcats have ever taken down the number one team in the country, and rightfully so. They stormed the court, and looks like they might have punched their ticket to March Madness here, for them. So, but on the Purdue end, just a complete meltdown, up 8 with just 4 minutes to go or so, and it completely turned on its head with turnovers and just poor decision-making by the Purdue Boilermakers, and we will dive all into it here today. I know Shara is asking for some positive vibes because that was miserable. I'm sure we'll at some point, get to our positive thoughts, but it's hard after a loss like that, to try to be positive because that was as bad a meltdown as they've had all season. I mean, their other two losses against Rutgers and IU really didn't have much to hang their head about. They fought, but today they had this game in hand and let it completely get away from them. So credit to Northwestern. They have played great defense all season long, and that didn't change here today. But Purdue kind of showed some things that they really haven't shown much this season, and that was not much poise down the stretch. Again, with the turnovers, I think the final number might have been 14 or 15 turnovers on the day. So that's 3 straight games now with a high number of turnovers. Just not good enough at the end of the day. We're going to get to our instant reactions here. Joe, when you look at what happened and transpired here, what's your instant reaction to all this?
Yeah, it's a tough ending. Obviously the last, 4 minutes, whatever you said, because this was a game that the first 36 minutes, even when Northwestern was on their runs and stuff, they cut it to 2, they cut it to 4 in the second half. It was never a game where I was like, oh, Purdue doesn't have control. I always felt Purdue was in control to the last, 4 minutes. And then it's turnovers and Northwestern got hot. I think even defensively for the most part, at least in the half court, I thought Purdue towards the end was better than in the first half. They kind of went under on some of the screens and stuff and just forced some tough shots. But, Northwestern gets them going. They get in transition because of turnovers. And, it just wasn't great guard play down the stretch too. And that hurts too. So, I think there was there was some positives for the first 36 minutes. And then it's just the last 4 minutes is where it was tough.
Yeah, Kraig, just an unbelievable collapse by Purdue. The first time I feel like all season, they really didn't show any poise down the stretch, turnovers upon turnovers and bad decision-making after being up 8. What's your instant reaction here to the meltdown in Evanston?
Well, I've got a couple instant reactions. One, the refs let this turn into a football game early when Purdue was up. And I feel like they do this all the time. When it appears there's a dominant team, they'll let teams get away with fouls early on. And I'd love to hear Isaiah's thoughts on this later, but man, I thought they let that turn into a rugby match for a lot of the game. And there should have been there was an obvious foul on a strip ball on Lawyer in that second half as things started to get a little bit closer. And it's like, what are you doing? That's obvious. But beyond that, if we're going to get away from the officiating stuff, Purdue going 0 for 8 from 3 in the second half, you can't win doing that. You got to hit some threes. And I don't want to nitpick because Zach was really good offensively in terms of hitting baskets, but didn't really feel like he got in the fight in the first half on rebounding. When Nicholson is out rebounding you in that first half, especially when he got a bunch of offensive boards, I just didn't really feel like Zach was in the fight early on the boards. And then he got forced into 6 turnovers today. Just not his best decision-making day at all.
Yeah, it was a tough one. Jeremy Hunter says, I don't even know what to say. Led the entire game after it was 2-2 and lose that way. Zach mauled every play. Flurcy was not was not a contributor today. And Braden played like a freshman today. Rough one. Jeremy, we understand your frustrations. Aidan, what's your instant reaction here today?
Yeah, it's hard to separate trying to talk about actual basketball from the officiating in this one, because I think it got out of hand. They just lost control of the game. I think a few key calls that maybe we'll get into with Isaiah or whatever. I mean, the goal over the back on Edie, which was just ridiculous. That was 2 points right there. Like Kraig mentioned, the foul on Lawyer that wasn't called, that gave Audige the dunk and really blew the roof off the place. Got, kind of let the place explode a little bit. And yeah, it's just what everybody else said. I think the big thing that frustrated me, and I'm not one to really put a whole ton of the blame on the kids because that's what they are, but I just thought we got away from the high pick and roll in the second half towards down the stretch there. I thought they were obsessive about feeding the post every single time. And I don't know that Zach had proven good enough against those doubles to warrant, getting the ball in the post every single possession down the stretch when we needed buckets. And they continually drew stuff up, throwing the ball. I get it. But those doubles are so good, and Zach just hadn't handled them all that well. Now, granted, you could tell me Braden didn't deserve to have the ball in his hands in the high pick and roll. But to me, that felt like the more efficient way to get baskets when it was difficult to do so down the stretch. And then I would say that second chance points for Northwestern, we'll get into the stats, but a couple key offensive rebounds there late, leading to Audige 3, really got him going. was more because we just didn't get the rebound than anything he did. He got a rhythm threes, so frustrating one. Really, really frustrating.
Yeah. Brian T says in chat, goaltending, shot clock violation, flagrant foul, Edie over the back, quote unquote, yet gets incessantly mugged. Morton's fourth foul. Hard not to focus on the refs. And that's exactly where we're at. We're going to have Isaiah, our ref correspondent, on here in just a little bit to keep the integrity of what we do here. We don't blame the refs when we go into every game. We could talk about the refs every single game with the way they handle Zach Edey. Even on the broadcast, they talked about it where, the Purdue, coaching staff has had enough of it. And then Stephen Bartle tries to say, well, it goes both ways because Zach's camped out in the paint, which is obviously pulling from Tom Izzo's quote. I could count a few times where Northwestern was camped out in the paint. So we could go back and forth about how the refs are, game to game when they, are trying to officiate Zach Edey. But today there was no question that things got completely out of hand. And the shot clock violation, and like I said, we'll talk to Isaiah, our ref correspondent here later on for his expertise on this situation, kind of illuminated this whole situation because their shot clock operator, it's their house. They screw up the shot clock and Purdue gets the rebound and they don't realize that they have a shot clock violation. They probably would have got the shot up. Instead, they think they have a fresh shot clock and now they've ran over the amount of time. They go and review it and determine that it should have been a shot clock violation. Well, how is Purdue supposed to know that? And instead, Purdue gets penalized for the ineptitude of the Northwestern shot clock operator, and they lose possession of the ball. That is not fair at all. I said tongue-in-cheek on Twitter, well, if they're not going to be penalized for their ineptitude with handling the shot clock, then they should just screw with the shot clock every possession. And then they'll just go to review it, and every possession will get screwed up if they're not going to be penalized for that. I just thought that was completely unacceptable, Kraig.
Two things I do want to mention. One, I think one thing we need to point out is we've only played, I'd have to go back and look at the stats specifically today, but to my knowledge, we've only played 3 top 30 defenses in the country. That's Rutgers, Northwestern, and Indiana. So that's 3 losses. We play Big 12 and some SEC teams in the tournament. We're going to face a lot more top 30 defenses. So I think that's something concerning going forward that we need to pay attention to. Also, and Joe just sent us this. We weren't watching the post game, so we don't know. But it sounds like some Purdue players got caught up. Like when Northwestern rushed the court, some Purdue players got caught up and had to fight their way out of the court
Newman
storm.
Specifically.
Well,
Really?
and I saw Mason Gillis mention too, and like had to push and shove to get out of the court storm. So that's something we need to keep an eye on as the show goes on.
Yeah, you've seen that from time to time in other games. You're always wondering if there'll ever be a tipping point when it comes to that. IU actually did a really good job when they court stormed this year of separating the players from the storm. They actually created a line. I think they were prepared from last year's court storm. Northwestern obviously hasn't stormed the court many times at Welsh Ryan Arena, so maybe not as prepared for that moment. And yeah, you could see on the telecast, Brandon Newman, I didn't see Mason, but Brandon Newman, Braden Smith, and I guess Mason Gillis too, get engulfed in the wave. And it's tough because they're doing what every college fan base and student section does. And I think court stormings are great, even though I was giving IU fans crap for doing it as far as where it, stands in the rivalry of things. But overall, I think court stormings are great for college basketball. So, it's tough, and I hope that they got out okay. But at the end of the day, that's just kind of, part of it. And you hope that nothing ever comes of it where, they have to end and ban court storming, because I think it's a great part of college basketball. Joining the show is my guy, Mark Carman. I don't know if his camera is going to be working. He's on the radio side of things for Northwestern basketball. I was going to let him come in and gloat. Mark, can you hear us?
Yeah, can you see me?
Yeah, I can see you.
Yeah,
Your Wi-Fi was a little shoddy for a second, but now we see you and hear you loud and clear. Mark Carman, you're on the radio broadcast for Northwestern basketball. You're a big Northwestern basketball fan and my co-host on CHGO Bears and a good friend of mine. And I wanted to give you an opportunity to gloat a little bit on a huge win by the Wildcats where they basically punched their ticket to the March Madness dance. How you doing today?
So, Braggs, I really appreciate the opportunity. A couple of things. Number one, I found these on the court after the storm right here. Those would be a pair of condoms. So it's it's very. I don't know what's going on with the wild side, the cat student section, but it seems like well, actually I do know what's going on, and God bless them. So listen, I appreciate the opportunity. I know you guys are diehards. I grew up rooting for Northwestern basketball, and it's weird. Like for the Cats right now, it's like super emotional because you lose so much, and you've been to the tournament once. And you were 0-18 against number one teams, and to actually do it. And I sit next to Billy McKinney, who's the greatest Wildcat hooper of all time. Played in the late 70s, played in the NBA for about 10 years. Just a first-class guy, the mayor of Zion. I mean, the dude was in full tears. So I know it sucks for Purdue today, but it was just such a incredible win for Northwestern, and they've had three key players leave the program in Miller Kopp at Indiana, Pete Nance at North Carolina, Ryan Young at Duke. Everyone counted out this team, myself mainly included. And you would think that they just stamped themselves to the tournament now with their 9th win in the Big Ten and beating the Boilers. So it sucks for Purdue. By the way, your crowd was absolutely incredible. The Boiler Up was rocking it as they always do at Welsh Ryan. The biggest visitors that ever come in here. And there's a lot of, obviously, we see a lot of green when it's Spartans, or a lot of red when it's Indiana, like it will be Wednesday night. But that was a grinded out game, and Cats got hot late, and somehow they pulled it out.
Well, you can make it up to us if you can beat Indiana here in a couple days. We'll forgive you if you can do that. Craig's saying no. Got anything?
That's not enough. That's not enough. Hey, we heard that the court storm situation caught up some Purdue players, and it got a little dicey for a second there. Did you see any of that?
Honestly, I didn't, and that's too bad if it did. I thought that the Northwestern crowd, with all due respect to the student section, which I still think at times is learning the game of basketball, if I may say that correctly, but they were chanting "overrated" with a lot of time left. I'm like, you can't chant that until you're up by 10 with a minute to go. So I was kind of a little bit concerned with that. But at any rate, I obviously I hope that nothing serious happened to anybody out there. They haven't had a court storm here since 2017 when they beat Michigan. That game basically put them in the dance. So they're not used to it. So I'm not trying to absolve anybody who acted like an idiot if that happened. But it is something that doesn't really happen all that often.
Well, Mark, congratulations. Wanted to let you come on and have a little gloating moment. It's a big moment for Northwestern basketball, and you're a good friend of mine. I look forward to seeing you here on Wednesday when we do some more Chicago Bears coverage. You've been over at the Super Bowl in Arizona, and I miss my, Mark. I need some Mark in my life. I feel like we've become so distant here over the last 10 days, so I wanted you to call in.
Well, Braggs, I did a terrible job today. I thought about you 100 times, but I didn't connect over this game, probably because I thought that the Cats were going to get killed. So I apologize, and I cannot wait to see you in all your glory. The sooner the better. I might drive over to your house right now.
Well, hey, we're cooking some prime rib. You're more than welcome to have a slice. I'm happy for you, even though you guys broke our little boiler hearts today, but I've been a believer in the Northwestern Wildcats for the majority of the season. I stand by it. I think it's almost a foregone conclusion at this point. I think they're in the dance, and I think you got to give, Coach Collins a lot of credit. He's been through some tough times here in the Big Ten, and he's really stood up, like you said, losing some of the guys that transferred out and still doing what they're doing. So we'll let you go, Mark, let you get back to work. But thanks again for hopping on.
All right, guys. The Boilers got bigger fish to fry. Good luck taking the whole damn thing. So thank you.
You got it. That is my guy, Mark Carman, joining us here for a little quick on the court at Welsh Ryan Arena. Once where the Purdue Boilermakers once clinched their 24th Big Ten championship, and Purdue still has every bit the opportunity to clinch their 25th Big Ten championship. But it's suddenly starting to get interesting. I mean, we didn't want to believe it, and they certainly still have a sizable lead, a lead you would take and I'd asked you at the beginning of the season, every Boilers fan would take it. But now they've lost 2 of 3. Indiana's won 7 of 8. They're starting to move up the Big Ten charts, and we still have another meeting with Indiana here coming up at the end of February. So things are starting to get interesting, and the Purdue Boilermakers schedule the rest of the year does not get any easier.
Yeah, I'm not too worried still. 2-game lead in the loss column. Indiana, Northwestern, Illinois all still play each other once. It's like five losses is going to win this outright for sure. 6 will probably win a share. I assume even that. I don't even know if six might still win outright. Like unless you think somebody's going to in order for 6 to not win outright, pretty much somebody has to run the table, and I don't think that happens. So obviously it's a tough loss, but in terms of the Big Ten race, I'm at least still not too worried.
Okay. And Greg, it's too early, Greg. Nobody wants to hear about the cute story about Northwestern yet. Purdue is.
I understand that. Purdue
is pissed off about the refs tonight.
Upset, and I get it. We don't want to hear about Northwestern. We're here to talk Purdue Boilermakers basketball, of course. But Mark is a good friend of mine. We do a lot of work together. I'm going to give him his moment on the show. And anytime someone's at the stadium, certainly fan or media or otherwise, we're going to give them an opportunity to come on, try some different things. So, hey, that's the other side of it. As Mark said, Purdue certainly has other bigger fish to fry. So I appreciate everyone's patience as we, let Mark check in for a minute. But we're going to go over the team stats here real quick, as we always do if we brought those in, and Joe has, as he always does. So we'll get back into the nuts and bolts of this game. Purdue shoots, I don't know if it's the lowest for the season, but it's probably close to it. A 36% from the field for Purdue, 17 of 47 shooting, 41% from the field for Northwestern, 23 of 56 from the field. Only 23% from three-point land for Purdue, 5 of 12, and most of those came very early on. Northwestern, who shot even worse at 18% from the field, 4 of 22, but a lot of their threes came later in the game, and you almost knew that was eventually going to come back to bite them because Northwestern had missed a lot of big opportunities early on. Not to say that Purdue didn't either, but you just felt like, at least for me watching the telecast, that like we weren't going to keep getting away with letting them get some of the threes they were getting off. Purdue shoots 79% from the free throw line, 19 of 24 from the stripe, 70% from the free throw line for Northwestern, 14 of 20 from the stripe, 44 free throws shot overall by both teams. For all the talking about the refs, a lot of calls and a lot of guys going to the free throw line in a very physical game. 16 turnovers for Purdue is the final number, only 9 for Northwestern. And at the end of the day, that is the difference in the game. 22 points off those turnovers for Northwestern, only 11 points off the turnovers for Purdue. That's just not going to get it done. Purdue, I think three games in a row, I think has turned it over 16 times exactly. Somebody would have to go back and check for me. Total rebounds, 35 for Purdue, 30 for Northwestern. They win that advantage as they normally do. 26 from the defensive glass, 9 offensively for Purdue. 30 rebounds, or 21 rebounds from the defensive glass, 9 offensively for Northwestern. Bench points, 12 for Northwestern, gets the edge over Purdue, only 11 bench points, even though I thought some guys off the bench played an admirable effort, which we'll get into. Points in the paint, second game in a row now, 24 points in the paint for Purdue, 32 points in the paint for Northwestern. Second game in a row, a team has outscored Purdue with points in the paint, something to monitor here for sure. 12 fast break points for Northwestern, only 6 for Purdue. 4 blocks apiece for Purdue and Northwestern. 5 steals for Northwestern, 11 steals for Northwestern, only 5 for Purdue. 15 assists for Purdue, 12 for Northwestern. And as we round it up, 35 minutes, basically 34 minutes and 42 seconds with the lead time for Purdue. Northwestern only led for 1 minute and 58 seconds of this game, but none bigger than the final seconds. Not good. When you see the turnovers, Joe, when you hear some of those stats that I ring off, what stands out to you?
I mean, yeah, turnovers is where it starts, 16. Yeah, I was looking, it's the fourth highest turnover percentage on the year. And I think this is kind of what showed, like, everybody was up in arms about last game with the turnovers and that. And to an extent, I think it was fair. I think last game was more of an outlier in Purdue not handling the press. I think the issue is when Purdue just gets sped up in the half court with the guards. IU is able to really, really pressure the guards, and that causes turnovers. Northwestern really, really pressures guards. Rutgers really, really pressures guards. And they have the length to do that. I guess Northwestern doesn't have a ton of length, but just being able to do that and then disrupt Edey when it gets down low. I think we'll get into it. And but Edey had his stretch where he went quick and everything was great, and then it stopped happening quick, and then things kind of went downhill from there. But turnovers is where it's at. And then the 3-point shooting, 5 for 22. A lot of good looks. Only probably a couple forced. So I would say those two just probably the main ones. So I don't take everything from everybody. They can have their stats too.
Kraig, when you heard some of those stats of the game, what stands out to you?
Points in the paint, obviously. And I think people have learned how to attack Zach. Like everybody talked about getting him a high ball screen early on in the year, but like how to do that exactly and where you do that from, I think people have started to figure out how to do it. Now you have to have the right players that can pull up and hit some mid-range shots. Like you're not going to get all the way to the rim necessarily. And Northwestern, not Audij, but Boo Booey, like he can do that. And then you look at the turnovers, and quite frankly, and I don't like, if you look at points and rebounds, you would say Zach was the star of the game for us. But at the same time, like, man, I just didn't feel like he battled for rebounds in the first half. I thought he was getting beat out by Nicholson, who's 4 or 5 inches shorter. I thought he brought more physicality than Zach did in the first half. And then Zach got sped up a lot. And he there was a couple times he just threw the ball to open space. There was nobody there. And, if he's National Player of the Year, he's got to make better decisions on that.
Aidan, your thoughts on some of the team stats of the game?
Yeah, obviously we've gone over them pretty much, but I think Purdue has to be a team. Kraig talks about it a lot, where their advantages are on the boards and then free throw rate. So they have to dominate those two areas because they're going to lose the turnover battle more often than not. They don't force teams to turn the ball over. So that's not where they're going to get an advantage. Now, usually they'll shoot a little bit better. They just miss some open looks. But, to only win the rebound battle by 5, and then you look at the free throws, and, yeah, they made 5 more of them, but they only got to the line 4 more times than Northwestern. Like, they didn't impose their will in the 2 areas where they normally do. And I do think part of that was the refs. I agree with Kraig that Edey could have fought more. I think First was fighting his ass off and got fouled several times on potential offensive rebounds or even defensive rebounds. I think it just become real easy to just kind of shove Caleb in the back, and it's been really no repercussions for that. So I think, I'd look at the rebounding war and I'd look at free throws, and, the shots didn't fall, but they didn't fall for Northwestern. This is what Northwestern does. Joe and I have talked about it at length. Like, they make games ugly. And if you look just at the Northwestern box score, you'd think, no way in hell they would have won. 4 for 22 from 3, below 45% from the field. And yet they kind of impose their will. They make it a kind of a rock fight, don't they, Joe? And just kind of, muck it up.
Yeah, no, that's their style. They're going to very much just grind it down. Similar to Purdue, they, for the most part, want to slow things down. I know they got some transition points off turnovers, but yeah, they want to make it as sloppy as possible, and that's how they're going to win. And because they're not efficient, they're not an efficient shooting team. They have shot makers that Bowie hit tough shots. Bowie hit 3 or 4 super tough floaters. Audij hit a couple of tough shots down the stretch. Like, that's who they are. They're not efficient, but if they can just make it sloppy and messy, then they have the talent that that can kind of take over those games.
We got a question in the chat from Chris Ruda. Was it bad box outs or hustle that you determined as the problem there?
There's a few rebounds where it's like First and Edie are so good at rebounding that they just knock it out of each other's hands. That it happens legit every game now. Aidan pointed it out a few games ago, and I've noticed it ever since. Like, there's a couple of those. Probably just more hustle. I don't know for sure. I'd have to rewatch, but that'd be my first lean.
I thought.
Go ahead. Either way, paper, rock, scissors.
I thought Nicholson did a hell of a job before the shot got to the rim. Like he did his work early, and I sent a tweet out in that first half that I thought Nicholson did a better job of bodying up Edie and really working his way out from the rim on those rebounds, like probably better than anybody else did all year. Like you watch that, and he just did it early. He got his body on him as soon as that ball left the shooter's hands. His body was on him. He was working and pushing him out, and just. I mean, Zach's height, he can reach over people, but if he's 5 feet out from the rim, he can't do that. And I thought Nicholson did a really good job at that today.
I agree. Nicholson was huge for them. I thought he was awesome in that first half, especially, and just battled, man. And who would have thought the best player from Clarkston, Michigan in this game was Nicholson and not Fletcher Lawyer, and it wasn't particularly close.
Yeah, Fletcher certainly had a rough game, and we'll go over some of the individual guys here in a minute. But the one point I would like to make when you talk about Kraig pointing out that what stood out to him was being outscored in points in the paint for the second game in a row. The Iowa game, it was more about fast break points, right? But this time around, it was because of how they were going at Zach Edey. I mean, you saw in the second half, Boo Booey use the rim and do the up and under. But just overall, I felt like in the first half, Purdue had a 7-point lead going into the halftime tunnel. And I know Zach Edey, one of the biggest emphasis he has is trying to stay out of foul trouble. So I get it to an extent. But at the same time, I felt like there was way too many buckets happening right in his face. And, Zach is trying to stay out of, have that balance of being aggressive and trying to get the block, but not getting the foul call. And I felt like the balance tipped in favor of Northwestern. Yes, they missed a lot of threes, so you kind of take the 7-point lead at the half because you have it. But at the same time, the amount of threes they missed in the first half, I was like, they should be up more. I felt like, and they were getting a lot of points right in Zach Edey's face.
Yeah, it's tough. I definitely want to rewatch. I don't know if Aidan, you saw like. Do you think that's Edey? Yeah. Do you think that's scheme? Because I thought this guard struggle. It's all like guard struggle getting around screens. So then Edey's put on more pressure. So now Northwestern can attack more.
It was.
It's like everywhere.
It was about as relentless, and I know we talk about Chicago action, but it was about as relentless Chicago that we've seen. From Chicago's Big Ten teams. Is that what they call them? Yeah. They really just attacked Purdue going downhill with Bowie and over and over again. And even IU didn't do it as much. IU did it a few times, but they would just have that big dribble over. They presented it a few different ways. They ran out of horns a couple times, just two bigs at the top, and then ran it with the 4 pinning down for the guard. And yeah, Braden didn't do a good job getting around those screens. He didn't against IU. He didn't again tonight. They made a bit of an adjustment. You could see Edey get a little bit higher in that second half, and that helped a little bit. But the second half is just so hard to analyze in my mind because, like, it was just such a war. It was rugby. I mean, it wasn't basketball. Like, I don't really know how to even, like, speak about the second half for most of it until down the stretch there.
Well, I just invited Isaiah, our ref correspondent here on Boilers in the Stands, to come on so we can yell at him about why the refs were so inept, especially in the second half. But before we do, I do want to give a shout out to, take a little commercial break here and give a shout out to some of the people that have jumped on board here. So I want to definitely give these guys the proper shout out, as we always do here on Boilers in the Stands. So that as life changes, your insurance needs change. Shire Insurance Services in Crown Point representing Auto Owners Insurance, has been helping clients with their changing insurance needs for over 25 years. As an independent agency, we love working with auto owners to provide excellent service to our clients. Buying your first home? Start with Shire. Expanding your business? Start with Shire. Your teenage driver passed the driving test and you're worried about the increased cost in auto insurance? Start with Shire. The first baby is on the way and you want to reassess your life insurance? Start with Shire. Whatever your insurance concern or need, we are ready to help make those things easy for you. Call 663-7274 or search online at www.shireinsurance.com and get all your insurance needs wrapped up.
You've dreamed about the perfect house, a place to call your own, and a place to not only stretch out, but to grow. Auto Owners protects your house because to you, it's home. That's simple human sense.
Ask Shire Insurance Services, serving Indiana, Illinois, and Michigan, if auto owners make sense for you.
Happy to help, man. I was just over there talking to myself anyway.
And there it is, getting some commercials in for these guys, and we appreciate everyone's support as we round third here on the season here for our Purdue Boilermakers. Also want to give a shout out to Mad Mushroom, our newest partner here at Boilers in the Stands. Starting tomorrow, you guys can get 15% off any order. Use the promo code BITS, Boilers in the Stands. Make sure you use that promo code BITS, and you will be able to get 15% off any order you make at Mad Mushroom. Very excited to have these guys on board. Really good pizza. Just opened a new location on Sagamore, a little off, the campus path. So make sure you go ahead and get – that's right, Chad Austin. Get those cheese sticks, and you can get 15% off those cheese sticks if you use the promo code BITS. So don't forget, please use our promo code. It'll help shout us out. And we want to shout out Mad Mushroom for jumping on board here at Boilers in the Stands. Also jumping on board is our guy Isaiah, our ref correspondent, coming into the Lions' den so we can yell at him for the ineptitude of the Zebras once again ruining our lives. This is this is exactly what we're worried about as we head to March. A referee crew that doesn't know how to ref Zach Edey, as they say on the broadcast. It's very difficult to officiate Zach Edey. So what we're going to do is just let everyone maul Zach Edey, and then anytime he barely touches someone, give them the foul on Zach and give everything the benefit of the doubt against Zach because he's just so difficult to officiate. God forbid we give Zach the benefit of the doubt because he's just so damn big. So how you doing, Isaiah?
I mean, it stinks, right? That's not the most fun game to watch, and I know everybody, all the Purdue fans are probably upset about that game. I'm sure I felt the same way as you there about some of the ways that it went, and also just some of the mistakes that we made down the stretch that were not super fun to watch.
Yeah, it was a tough one. We definitely have a lot of questions for you. Kraig or Joe or Aidan, whoever wants to throw it to Isaiah first to kind of pick his brain, we'll do that because we got a few for sure.
Yeah, I mean, my question is on the Mason Gillis intentional foul. Like to me, when I actually thought if they were going to call that intentional, it might go on David from behind. To me, Gillis made an obvious and clear play on the ball, and I just don't understand how they call an intentional foul on Mason when he hits the ball with first before he even hits the player. So how do they call that?
Yeah, I mean, I was trying to go through the NCAA rule book just to see, what they're looking at for flagrant foul. Because like you said, there's two players, right? There's two players that were involved in that play that you could be calling. And the basic definition of a flagrant, and I'm reading from the NCAA rule book right now, is players shall not contact an opponent in a flagrant, excessive, severe, or extreme manner while the ball is live. typically, we're looking for unnecessary. We're looking for blatant attempts to stop a fast break opportunity without, again, a play on the ball, just a grab or something like that. And I don't know how we can justify that as a flagrant foul because, like you said, he got the ball, I'm pretty sure. Now, I'd have to go back to confirm that. But either way, you're swiping towards the ball. I just don't see how we can call that excessive, how we can call that not part of a basketball play. And I didn't like that call. I think for those who watched.
Was it called flagrant on – because there was two guys going at the ball. Was it Fletcher and Gillis?
Jenkins.
Jenkins. Okay, Jenkins and Gillis. Do we know?
But they didn't call it on Jenkins. They called it on Gillis specifically.
That was my question.
They called it on Morton?
Was it Morton or was it Gillis?
I thought it was Gillis.
No, Jenkins and Gillis converged. Jenkins hit him first. Gillis hit him second. But that is my question: is who was the flagrant foul specifically called on? Because if it was Mason Gillis, like both, I don't agree with. But certainly Mason Gillis was 100% going for the ball. So I don't know if anyone has clarity on, who was actually called for the flagrant foul.
But like you said, either way, it's just it irks me too for those who watched the Duke Virginia game last night. We saw an egregious use of the replay system to overturn a call that had no business being overturned. No. And it's the same thing here, basically, where I just think we're using this replay system wrong. You were looking for, replay is here to correct very obvious mistakes. And I think that at the point, even though it is allowed to go and replay for a flagrant foul there, I think the point at which we're parsing that play and finding a way to call it a flagrant is just not what replay is for.
So the other big one in the second half was this shot clock situation. I said at the beginning of the show, I think it's completely unfair for the home shot clock operator to mess up and reset the shot clock, which throws Purdue off. They're looking up at it above the hoop. They think they have a fresh shot clock. They stop play because Doug Collins is freaking out. Is his name Doug Collins or is that his dad?
Chris Collins.
I always say Doug Collins. Chris Collins.
Are you sure it's not Phil? Phil Collins.
Feel it in the air tonight.
Right.
Doug Collins played for the Bulls, so I always say Doug first. Chris Collins, who has done a fantastic job this year, but I couldn't help but laugh when he's yelling at the refs about the shot clock when it's his shot clock operator. They're at home. It's his fault that they messed up. So they stop play, they review it, and it turns out it shouldn't have been reset. And because of that, Purdue held the ball long enough to where they determined it would have been a shot clock violation, only because Purdue's looking at the shot clock that's reset. To me, if the rule is that they're going to review it in that way and dissect how many seconds would have went off the clock, that is completely unfair to Purdue to be penalized against that, especially if it's the home court, shot clock operator that's the one that messes it up. And in that case, like I said on Twitter, if there's no rule, then every time a team comes to West Lafayette, the shot clock operator should just mess up every time the other team goes down for a possession. If there's no rule against it, just keep screwing it up, mess with their heads. We'll stop play every possession, and then we'll review it whether or not they should have a shot clock violation. If there's no rule against it, just do that. Home court advantage. To me, that was just inexcusable, but I just want to hear your thoughts on the rule and how that transpired.
Yeah, it's an all-around bad situation because it's a place where the rule is written the way it is, and I hate that rule. I hate the way that it is implemented there, but that's the way the book, and it's mandatory for the officials to go to the monitor and if the clock has been erroneously reset, the book mandates that they get a stopwatch out and they figure out what the timing. And it's not fair because the team that keeps the ball, then again, they're assuming that the clock was correct. But the book requires them to go back and they retroactively call the violation. There's two schools of thought, right? Is one, do we just make it not reviewable? Do we say, look, the mistake was made and we can't correct it? I threw out the idea of using the alternating possession arrow. I know nobody likes the arrow, but that's a way you could potentially take things out. Now, again, the concern of a shot clock or a clock operator purposely messing with the clock, it's there, but at a point at which you have multiple clock errors starting to happen, that's when the officials are going to go to the table and say, you need to get this together, or we're going to start considering delay of game violation.
All right. And obviously I'm being dramatic when I say that, to do it every time down the court as a home clock operator. But at the same time, let's say they don't do it at all and you bust it out in the pivotal moment at the very end of the game. Let's say that happened when Purdue was down 2 with 1 minute and 20 seconds to go. Like, it doesn't get as magnified because it was early in the second half. But if it's in that kind of a moment and all they can do is go off of the fact that, well, it would have been because Purdue didn't shoot. Like, to me, that rule absolutely has to be reconsidered. And as you mentioned, maybe using, a jump ball, or to me, it should come down to who's the home clock operator. And if you're the home clock operator and it's your mess up, the away team should not be penalized for that. And it should have just been Purdue out of bounds, 20-second shot clock, and that will teach the Northwestern shot clock operator to do his job correctly.
Yeah,
or even 8 seconds shot clock when the mess up occurred. Like, give it back to Purdue with 8 seconds left to go. That's when the mess up happened. Start from there. But Isaiah, I got to ask you, because I'm going to your Twitter now. So if you tweeted this and regret it now, you're gonna. You said this was not a basketball game. This was football. And in the tournament, this isn't going to be how the game is played. Can you expand on that a little bit about why you don't think we'll see a game like that in the tournament?
We might be coming back to that in March. We might be coming back to that tweet in March.
Don't jinx it.
This might be an unpopular opinion among people, or maybe it is a popular opinion. Some would say I shouldn't be tweeting that, and that was a bit in the heat of the moment. But I have for a very long time been on the train that the Big Ten suffers in the NCAA tournament because of the way that the games are called. Now, again, we ask for consistency, right? So if a game is consistently physical, then that's what it is. But I look at a game like this, I look at other games I've watched not involving Purdue, and I just look at the amount of contact on rebounds, on loose balls, that I think, I just really think you need to put whistles on. Like, we had one play today where Bardo is like, oh, Edie got fouled 4 times there and they didn't have a whistle, so I guess Northwestern got away. Well, that was on a rebound. Like, at my level, in the high school level, right, we talk about fouls that have consequence on the rebound. Those are, you have to call those. And I just feel like when I watch other conferences too, I think the Big 12 is great. I think Big 12 does a really good job at getting the obvious called and not materially impacting the flow of the game. But it's just, I don't think this is good basketball to watch when you see some of the stuff that I think was let go today.
So Isaiah, I have a question to that. Like, the consistency piece, because that's what really bothered me, was it felt like it was a completely different game once the crowd got into it, once it got tight in that second half. Like, to me, I don't understand the no calls on those loose balls, on the rebounds. Like, it felt to me that First was fouled maybe 5+ times that went uncalled. And so, like, what do we do about that? Because is it just they're turning a blind eye to the contact underneath? Like, is it they're getting into the game? Because this crew, I mean, Roger Ayers consistently ranked one of the best refs. I mean, the other 2 guys I don't really know much about, but I'm getting concerned about a scrappy 8-9 seed that plays a lot like Northwestern, who's just allowed to be physical for the course of the game. And because really, like, and I've seen some people, like, why are you guys complaining the fouls were even? Well, Purdue is way up there in free throw rate on both ways, and Northwestern is closer to the 200s. So really what the actual, like, a normal result would be Purdue, a lot higher in terms of fouls. Like, it wouldn't be an even game. That's not a normal result for a Purdue game. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that, or how we could fix that, but that just was what got to me today.
Yeah, and like you said, Ayers is one of the best. I mean, I was really happy when they announced Ayers was on this crew because he's a vet, and you talk about a guy who's not going to be swayed by a crowd, who's not worried in a tough, close game situation. Ayers is one of those guys, but like you said, at the end of the day, we have independent officials, right? They don't work for conferences. They're hired on an independent basis, and sometimes that leads to inconsistencies. I don't know the other two officials on this crew very well. So I can't tell you, what their calling history is, what they typically look like. I know there's one part, there's a couple particular officials that work Big Ten games that Purdue fans really typically don't like. And, again, it's like you look, yeah. So it's like you look at it and you're like, how best do we have these guys who have these crazy schedules? Like people were highlighting the John Higgins travel schedule because he's another great official. Everybody wants him, right? So it's one of those situations where I don't know, how you develop a little bit more consistency on it, because it feels like it varies from game to game. But I just feel like in the Big Ten, the amount of the physicality that we allow is going past, where 50-50 is acceptable. And I think it materially impacts the game.
One of the other calls that somebody brought up, Isaiah, was when we were up 59-57, Chase Aldige ran out of bounds.
No, it was just to clarify, we were up 57-56, and then Chase Aldige hit the 3 in the corner. Go ahead.
But he went out of bounds and came back in, was the first player to touch the ball. Is that something that should be called? I don't know if you saw it. I didn't see it until this person pointed it out. But do you have to be forced out to be able to come back in and be the first player to touch it, or how's that happen?
So I'd have to check the NCAA rule book on this, because I know at high school level that's not a violation to go out of bounds, come back in, as long as you immediately come back in. You can't leave the court for an extended period of time, that's a technical foul if you do that. So I would have to check the NCAA rule book. I think it is legal at college. I know it is not in the NBA.
I was going to say the IU game the other day, I know Galloway.
What do we pay you for, Isaiah?
Come on, you have to know every single rule all the time off the top of your head.
Refs, Kraig. This is what I'm talking about. No, I'm kidding, Isaiah.
They got to get me to the NCAA level before I can tell you this college stuff without a doubt. But
hey, we hope we get to bring you back on in like 5 years, and you're in the Final Four. Like that's our hope.
Well, the thing is, and not to cut off in, because you go ahead with what you're saying, but the one thing I will say is, when they lost to St. Peter's, this is exactly what they went up against, was a dogfight. So they absolutely can find this team in the tournament. Refs that are going to get lost in the moment. It's going to be a crazed crowd. They'll likely be a 1 seed, unless the wheels fall off the wagon here these last 5 games of the season. Regardless, with Zach Edey running out that tunnel, they're always going to be this, the Goliath to whatever David they're playing. And they are going to come across this, and they are going to come across a ref crew that's going to, get lost in the moment. It's going to happen. And for the most part today, I thought they handled it well until the final 3.5 minutes where they're up 8. And they beat themselves. We can talk about the refs, and there were certainly things that we can point to. You can point to a lot of things in a lot of games. Today certainly got out of hand. I'm not saying it isn't, and that's why we are focusing on it here today. But at the same time, they beat themselves just as much as the refs beat them, And I'm not going to be someone that easily goes to the refs after every game. I definitely... After the St. Peter's game, Zach Edey and Travion Williams were mauled at every time they tried to post up in that game, and it wasn't called. But at the end of the day, you got to show some toughness. Like the famous Matt Painter clip that they always show. Hey, you gotta be ready for this. This isn't for the weak. And you're going to have games where the calls aren't going to go your way. You got to fight through them. I do think one of the positives is, even in this kind of a dogfight, Zach Edey still found a way to stay out of foul trouble and stay in the game and be an impact for the team. Whereas if we get into the tournament and you face that St. Peter's type, that's going to be the key. Yeah, you're going to be in a dogfight of the game, but the biggest key is that Zach Edey's still on the floor in that dogfight. That's going to give you your best chance to win, because that is what opens everything else up for Purdue. So, that's basically where I stand. Go ahead, Aiden.
I hear that. No, I hear that, but I also think maybe Edey should commit a hard foul or two every now and again in this kind of game. I mean, just because, to kind of match it, I think Purdue, we do kind of just let it happen. And you're right. They should have been tougher. They shouldn't have turned it over. I think Braden, obviously, in particular, just I sent out a tweet talking about he had been unbelievable from a decision-making standpoint, at the end of the first half, and guys were grilling me, talking about he's got to stop leaving his feet. He's got to stop leaving his feet. And I was kind of brushed it off. And then obviously not feeling great about that a couple hours later with those late turnovers. But yeah, I agree. They got to be tougher. But it just worries me, man. Again, I keep coming back to that 8-9 game. If we're a 1 seed and they're making a push and the refs just kind of get caught up in it and Purdue doesn't kind of punch back, they just kind of take it. And I thought today Purdue had a couple really poor fouls. Ethan Morton, almost no foul he had today was a smart decision. I didn't think. Kept giving him and ones, which is kind of the cardinal sin on a fast break, just a little light bump and then, giving the M1. But Kraig looks like he has something to say.
No,
he's not a great poker player, as we know.
Yeah, I thought it was give and take on Morton, because I thought Morton made a few questionable defensive decisions today, but I thought offensively he was great today.
Only guy not named Edey to score in the second half, Morton, for Purdue.
And
from the field, obviously, because
from the field,
right?
From the field. Yeah.
And even with that said, I don't think we can give Zach a free pass either. Like I said, I just don't think he got in a fight rebounding early in this game. It felt like he was passive down there on the block. And then, I mean, those 5 turnovers, and beyond those 5 turnovers, there were 3 or 4 passes where there was a wide open guy from 3 and they had to catch him from their feet or catch him above their head. He just didn't seem into it today. And he's the national player of the year. I get that. He's one of the best players Purdue's ever had. I get that. I just didn't feel like he was locked in today. And I get it. You look at the stats and you're like, well, Zach's the only reason we're in the game. I get that. But there were still some things today that, to me, made me raise my eyebrows.
And as I pointed out, I really do, you go back and watch it and tell me what you think, Aiden and Joe and Kraig. But I think that he allowed a lot of points in the first half that kept Northwestern in striking distance. He's a great player, but, I mean, you got to keep a critical eye to everyone. And we'll get into our individual breakdowns here in a second. Chad Austin said in the chat, I thought the famous clip was Painter with his eyes when Braggs is giving his first question, and this is the eyes he gives you. So,
right. And to be clear, this is not the famous Purdue Chad Austin that beat IU on 2 last-second shots. At least I assume it's not. But so,
Isaiah, thank you very much for jumping in. You're going to be our aficionado for referee calls here, our ref correspondent here as we go forward. We appreciate it. Enjoy your Super Bowl here tonight, and thanks again as always for jumping on.
Thanks everybody. Boiler up.
Boiler up, hammer down.
Thanks, Isaiah.
I'm gonna get hammered down here real quick because I had to step away. I had to step away for a second because I needed a shot after that. So I'm gonna take one. Here's looking at you guys.
What are you drinking there, Greg?
That was Fireball. Whew, that warms
you up. You going all game day Gabby. All game day Gabby on us.
Yeah, well, Fireball isn't a sponsor, so they get a little shout out. And then I got some Crown and Coke. If either want to be a sponsor to this show, they're welcome to. But this is what we're doing here. I had to after that game. Chill the nerves. I mean, that was a little too much to blow an 8-point lead at the end. I mean, the magic number stays at 3 to have a shared, bid for a regular season championship, 4 if you want the outright championship. It still could line up potentially where that IU Purdue game could potentially be the game they clinch the Big Ten championship if things go right. Because as Joe mentioned, some of the teams behind us still have to play each other. So that's going to dip into this magic number that Purdue's staring at. Well, that's right. We're taking some fire. Hey, we're having some fun. The Super Bowl's coming up, and we're giving you a little post-game / pre-game for the Super Bowl here while we lick our wounds.
Who you taking, Greg, tonight?
I got the Eagles.
Greg, you're on a Purdue show. George Karlaftis plays for the Chiefs. The only right answer is the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah,
that's it.
I mean, I get it, and I know Purdue fans will certainly be rooting for them. I've got good friends that root for both teams. And the Eagles and Chiefs, recently won a Super Bowl, so kind of spoil the riches. Selfishly, as a Bears fan, watching Jalen Hurts, the better he does, I feel like the better we can feel as Bears fans with a dual threat quarterback who has a lot of similarities to Jalen Hurts with Justin Fields. I think in the way they play the quarterback position, that's part of my calculus of why I'm leaning Eagles here today.
But Jalen can throw.
Hey, you better watch, okay. And that is enough from Kraig here today. He's now gone. That's how this works. Say that again, Kraig, and I will immediately replace you. Michael Hogg's already putting in his bid in the chat. You'll be gone in a minute if we're going to do some Justin Fields slander on this chat. There's no Sasha Stefanovic slander on this chat, no Justin Fields slander, and no Devin Hester slander. But I digress. Let's get to some individual stuff. We don't have to go crazy with it. We don't want to go too long here today. We try to keep our post games to an hour and a half at the most. Sometimes we go a little over, but we don't have to go insane. We've kind of covered some of the important nuts and bolts of this game, whether it's Zach Edey's play or some of the team statistics. But there are some people that I do want to talk about. I think we've talked enough about Zach Edey at this point. We can go back to him, but somebody we do have to talk about here today is Fletcher Lawyer. I mean, probably his worst game in a Purdue Boilermakers uniform. Unfortunately, only 2 points, 1 of 6 from the field, 0 of 2 from 3, 3 rebounds. If I'm reading this right, 1 assist, 3 fouls, 2 turnovers in 26 minutes of play. You guys were mentioning it in our group chat through text that, he was getting handled on both ends of the court. Aidan, what was your observation from Fletcher Lawyer today?
Well, yeah, just Chase Audige, man. Why he's going to be one of the top defenders, Big Ten all defensive team. I think Joe and I had talked about he gets a lot of steals, gets a lot of counting stats, but I thought today his physicality showed up. His length, he's long for a 6'4" guard. He's physical. There's obviously been more of a focus from opposing teams to take Lawyer out of the game by using physicality, and they did that. And then, it just got to the point where nothing was working for him early. He was getting bullied a little bit on the other end, and Painter went away from him. There were times where Painter had Newman out there instead of him. He didn't get his usual run. He turned the ball over. Obviously a critical turnover there to get the Audige dunk to go up 5. Granted, he may have been fouled on that, but again, still a turnover. Got to get tougher. This will be the game where Fletch is, having second thoughts about, not if Fletch isn't motivated in the offseason in the weight room, this will be the one they have pulled up for him because that's just he's just not physically ready for a game like that, I don't think.
And I'm not sure what his numbers are here recently, maybe over even a 5 to 6 game stretch. Go ahead, Aidan, if you've got some off the top of your head. But I feel like he has been struggling from 3-point land here over the last 5 or 6 games. Joe's always eyeballing. I can see where his eyes are moving. But I'm pretty sure I heard a number in the last game where he's been a little cold from 3-point land. He's doing the math in his head. It's scaring me.
Is 7 of 31.
Right.
Since Minnesota, he went 2 or 3 at Michigan State, and since then I think 7 of 31.
Right. So, and I heard this stat either last game or a couple games ago, and Brian Newbert, who does just such a fantastic job with GoldenBlack.com, and I hope he's feeling better. He's been giving us his post game reactions, which to me is therapy in a lot of ways because I always enjoy his perspective on things. But he's been saying Fletcher Lawyer, get ready because you're going to be getting the Sasha Stefanovic treatment. And, you know, while Fletcher does add a little more to his game with the way he attacks the rim and he can really pass in traffic and do some dynamic things as a freshman, he is getting that treatment all of a sudden, getting chased off the three-point line. Joe, in your mind, you know, obviously I think what goes up must come down, and I think he'll start hitting them again. But, you know, your observations and what does he have to do to maybe get out of this funk, so to speak, if that's what you want to call it. I know he had 17 last game, so maybe funk isn't the right word.
I mean, even that, it was still 2 of 8 from 3. I don't know, like knock down some open ones. It's a simple analysis, and it's not like he's trying to miss or anything like that. But doing that, you know, helps for sure. Just get into a little bit of a rhythm. And even like, I don't know, it's tough because even a lot of his drives this year is a lot of creative. You know, he's not going to out-muscle you. He's not faster than you, but he understands angles. He knows how to use the glass. He knows how to just kind of use his body well to create space. So getting a little bit back to that, but like in order for him to be better, it might just hurt that he's been so good. You know, now he gets the Audige matchup, like, you know, coming into the year that he probably, like if this was say the first game of the year or something, like he's not getting the Audige matchup. And so he's seeing better and more physical defenders now because of how good he is. Teams have to respect him. So I think, you know, it kind of goes back to Aidan, just being able to work through it because once he can get downhill. Also, you know, Northwestern, I'm actually blanking if they did it a ton or not. So correct me if I'm wrong, one of you two or anybody. They hedged a lot, I believe, or at least a decent bit, and that just takes away the guards. Lawyer can't, because then Lawyer can't turn the corner. You know, that Chicago action that we talk about, and I'll draw up in a bit, you know, where he gets to turn the corner. They're hedging that, and so now
while we're talking about it, why don't you do it right now, and then
do it.
We'll get into it. Let's do it. We're going to have our little chalkboard segment. This is a segment a lot of people enjoy from our guy Joe, who breaks down the X's and the O's.
All right, so this is actually going to be a Northwestern set. This is what they ran legitimately. It felt like 70% of their possessions. And so it's just loop Chicago, and then it's the snug gut. So the gut means it's just happening up here, like up in the lane. Snug is, we're kind of coining is like it's all happening with inside the 3-point line. So then for the loop Chicago, they start out just kind of something like this, you know, just kind of your basic thing. This man would always flash up here, pass goes here, and then he's kind of, as that's happening, he's kind of coming down here. So now as that happens, we have him with the, actually this is more over here. We have like the ball here. We have this guy who is up here. He's now down here. And then it's just, this is the simple Chicago action that, you know, Purdue loves to run, stuff like, and it's just something that we see always. So this is a screen, down screen into this like direct handoff right here. And so now he's getting the ball and he's really turning it like here. And that was the key with all this is like, it's really, really, really tight. So like this whole thing, and honestly, I drew it a little wrong. It's more like this. He's setting the handoff here. He's setting a screen here. So this guy's coming around and he's doing like this. And as this is happening, this guy's kind of lifting. They're both lifting, so that way you can't tag. And Bowie did a really good job in this. Just he kind of gets the ball in here and he's either floating. You have a guy rolling. This guy's popping. And so he's either hitting the roller because there's no tag, getting a floater, getting to the rim a little bit, although, you know, Edie sent a couple of his back. And that's just, it's just really tough. This is, you know, IU did it too, that specifically the snug Chicago where like when Purdue runs it, they have, you know, ignore all this. When Purdue runs their Chicago, they have like Edie way up here. And it's now Lawyers coming up here. IU did it. Northwestern did it. It's like all right here. And so it's really, really deep. And so now there's only 15 feet of space to work with. And that makes it a little tougher on the offense, right? You have less space to work, but also on the defense, like you have to get through screens immediately. Purdue didn't. And that's where, you know, that's where it's going to, you mentioned earlier about being able to attack Edie. And it's like, they can't attack Edie because the guards didn't get through well. And then because Edie plays such a deep drop coverage, now it's like Bowie's able to kind of take up that space. And so it's just, it's very much a give and take on that side of, you know, do you want Edie to step up a little more? I think Aidan, you said he stepped up a little bit more in the second half. But then you're, you know, exposing him a little bit more to getting blown by. I think he does a decent job on that, but that was that. So specifically, just that snug Chicago that they just ran all within 15 feet, and it got a lot of looks for him.
And I would add, like, one guy, B. Solt, why can't we seem to stop it in the chat? Well, every team in the country is pretty much running this over and over again, and that's because it's very difficult to stop, right?
We run
like you got to be in really good communication, and Purdue's guards, they're not going to go under it. A lot of people would like them to try to go under it. They have not. And they have to fight over screens and moving screens at times. Like guys will stick out their hip, guys will kind of make it difficult on you. We saw Braden just fall down twice in the first half that led to good looks for them on that same action. And it's pretty, teams like Northwestern are just relentless with it. They go 5 out with their 5, and then they can run it on either side. He can dribble over and just get into it. So yeah, it's tough. Like Purdue runs a lot of it. Purdue probably runs more other stuff than other teams in the country. There are teams like Northwestern that literally that's all they do.
That's what they run
because it's so difficult to guard. Yeah, it's just so hard to guard, and there are different reads off of it. Like on the pin down, if they try to switch that aggressively, then the guy setting the first screen could slip it to the rim. So there's a lot of reads off it. We don't have to get way deep in the weeds here, but good point there by Joe, because like we got killed on that today. We got killed at IU, and it will continue to see it, no doubt about it.
Well, and if you watch the NBA, I know a lot of our fans are not NBA watchers, but if you watch the NBA, like they're going to run that over and over and over and just try to put you into bad matchups. And we're seeing that more and more in the college game. I do think one thing that we need to bring into question, and none of the 4 of us are going to claim that we're even close to as bright-minded as Matt Painter. None of us are going to do that.
1%. Brian from Rensselaer would,
but like this was one of the few games this year that I was just like, why did we go away from this? Like Braden Smith and high ball screen pick and roll action with Edie, whether it was going to Zach or whether Braden was scoring, I really thought it was more on the kickouts to everybody else out of that action that was working in the first half. And then in the second half, we went to a lot back to the system offense and went away from just giving Braden the ball and letting him making decisions. We went back to it at the very end, and then Braden made a couple bad decisions, but I didn't understand why we went away from that like early mid second half when it had worked a bunch in the first half. And I guess the other thing before I give you the mic, Aidan, is when did we get our lead in the first half? It's when we went up to our second unit. Like, and that's rare. It hasn't happened a lot, but it was when we went to TKR and Newman, Jenkins, and I think Morton and Smith were maybe still on the floor. But that's when we got our 10-point gap. And then we never went back to that unit in the second half either. So there was a couple things today that I was like, well, why didn't we go back to what was working?
Yeah, I agree. And in fairness to Painter, like, unless it's an ATO, that's Coach Johnson calling those plays, telling them what to do. Now we don't obviously know, but
ATO being after timeout for those of you.
Yeah, after timeout play, and obviously Painter has the final say. So again, I'm with you there, but like, yeah, and specifically the side post ups late, on the block, rather than at least trying to get back to that middle of the floor where they seem to not be able to stop it at all, which was a great job going to the middle of the floor.
The side post up hadn't worked all game. Everything that worked for Zach was in the middle of the floor. So I didn't get that either.
No, they took it away with that double, and he's not. And there was one where, remember the one where Newman was wide open in the corner? They just doubled off him, and Zach passed it to him like just late there. And I don't know if Painter was yelling at Newman for not moving there to where it was easier, but Zach's 7'4", 290. He doesn't have the flexibility when it's that good of a double to make a pass. So often he just chucks it up, as we saw today, because he's not capable right now of making any kind of, if that first dive isn't there and they took that away, they did an unbelievable job on those doubles on just regular post-ups on the side, on the blocks. So when we went to it in the middle third of the floor, it was much more effective. But I agree. Just completely went away from high ball screen action. And it doesn't, of course, they're going to do high ball screens in transition, that early drag screen. They do that. That's a rule. They do it every time. But we saw in the first half, there were quite a bit of sets that flowed into high ball screen action. Braden had the ball in his hands a ton in that first half, and just made plays over and over again. And obviously in the second half, he didn't make those same plays. But, his first half, and maybe we could get into Braden a little bit here. That's a decent segue, is like His first half was unreal. I mean, from a passing standpoint.
And before we dive into Braden, which I'm absolutely happy to talk about here, just want to give a shout out to our guys at Indiana Sports Coverage, specifically ISC Purdue. Make sure you follow them at ISC Purdue, at ISC_PU. They provide us with a lot of in-game photos from today's game and every game when we do these post-game shows. So these are some of the images you're looking at here. Mason Gillis pulling up for three, had some big threes in the first half. Trey Kaufman-Red, I thought, looked very strong in the first half. There's Braden Smith. We'll certainly talk about him here in a second. One guy, definitely before we leave, I want to talk about Brandon Newman. So we'll talk about Braden, but I certainly want to talk about Brandon's effort today because I thought it was phenomenal. But these are some of the images that you see from Indiana Sports Coverage, Purdue, and they do such a great job. So make sure you follow them at ISC_Purdue. There's Zach Eady hammering it home with the and one. I don't know if he got an and one there, but he certainly let Nicholson know there after that dunk. So make sure you follow them all day long. They do a great job of covering Purdue, and we appreciate their support with us. So let's talk about Braden Smith. When you talk about his day today, Braden Smith, 10 points, only 1 of 7 from the field, 1 of 3 from 3, 7 of 8 from the free throw line. He does such a great job of drawing contact as he's driving to the rim. 3 rebounds, 4 assists, only 1 foul on 3 turnovers, and he led the team with 36 minutes of play. Aidan, you can start it off. Your thoughts with Braden Smith's game today?
Yeah, just tailed 2 halves, right? Like he got away with jumping in the air, and making just some unbelievable passes. The one where Edie didn't finish it, where it was late in the clock, Braden was pulling it out. Almost every point guard in that situation would take a step back long 2 or 3. He somehow floats it in there to Zach, and Zach gets fouled. Should have probably made that one. I could probably, and I may actually do this, go back and clip probably 10 passes from that first half that just the average human being wouldn't make. So that was so impressive, and I felt like he was in complete control. And then just the complete opposite in the second half. Just wasn't sharp. Made some really poor decisions. Got caught on that baseline. It's that baseline drift where he doesn't want to get to 2 feet because his whole life he's been the smallest guy on the floor, and he's going to get doubled and trapped. So he just decides to jump, and once you jump, there's no going back. So, it was unfortunate to see him turn the ball over. I thought he was fairly aggressive, took some good shots. Probably 3 or 4 should have been assists in the first half. But, man, when we needed it most down the stretch, he obviously, looked like a freshman out there, looked like a freshman point guard. And that's just going to happen, isn't it, Joe?
Yeah, no, that's he played a great first 35 minutes. Last few was tough. And that's I think you kind of touched on the 3 to 4 more assists, and that's probably something that's going to be probably not talked about a ton. Purdue hits 3 of their open threes, and I know you could do this both ways. Northwestern hit missed jumpers too, so I get that part. But Purdue hits 3 open threes, and this is a different ball game. Newman had one with 5 minutes left or so that would have been big, stuff like that. But no, Smith, he was in the rhythm. He was super aggressive early, and then just kind of got out of it towards the end. And Northwestern ramped up their physicality a bit, so maybe that's part of it. I'm not entirely sure, but. Aside from those last 5 minutes, I thought he was playing really, really well, and he was a big reason that the Purdue was playing the way they were in that first half.
Kraig, your thoughts with Braden Smith's day today?
I mean, it was great until it wasn't, right? Like, I mean, that's what it was. It was like, oh, Braden's controlling this game, and then it was like, oh, down the stretch, whoa, Braden didn't control that game. So, it's tough, and I'm going to go to a space here. I need Purdue fans to live with me here for a second, okay? I'm going to go to a space here. One of the things that we've said about this team compared to last year's team is that we don't have – we had the great moments from Jaden Ivey last year, and people have said, right, but we haven't had to live through those bad moments where you're special – and sometimes that specialness can get you in trouble because you could think you can make a play out of nothing. But those last couple minutes were kind of like that. All right. That's like where Braden thought he is special from a playmaker standpoint, and he got himself caught up in some spots where he thought he could do it and just got hung up and got hung out to dry. And that's not too dissimilar to a few times where we saw Jaden last year, where Jaden thought he could pull something out of nothing and just couldn't do it. So, yeah, that's kind of the way it went down the stretch today for him, unfortunately. But the first 35, as Joe said, the first 35 minutes of that game was really, really good for him.
Yeah. And I wouldn't say they've hit a freshman wall, but they're getting challenged. There's starting to be a book on them, so to speak. Earlier somebody asked, like, what is the Sasha Stefanovic treatment that Fletcher Lawyer's dealing with? Basically, what I mean by that is being ran off the 3-point line at all times, where they're the same way they put immense attention on Zach Edey when they get in the post and you're seeing these doubles before he even gets the ball. That's how Fletcher Lawyer is going to start getting treated at the 3-point line. Now, lucky for Purdue and Fletcher Lawyer's game, he has the ability to attack the rim, read the defense, understand leverage, and get to the rim and make the right plays a lot of the time. So he's got the counter that whatever a defense is going to throw to him, a lot of times he's smart enough to figure out what that counter is. But as far as being ran off the 3-point line and teams and players being physical with him is going to be something he has to continue to fight through to get his buckets. They're not going to make life easy on him, because as much as this team goes as Zach Edey goes, in a lot of ways, this team goes as Fletcher Lawyer gets hot too. That's how they blew a lot of teams out here early in this season. So they know this, but that's the beauty. This is why Purdue is one of the top teams in the country, and losing today doesn't change that. Braden Smith understands how to read a defense and take with the defense, either pull up when they're going under them like you saw in the last game, or drive to the rim, alley-oop to Edey, all these different things. They're smart players. Edey's a smart player. Braden's a smart player. Fletcher's a smart player. Ethan Morton is a smart player, even if he took some tough fouls today that maybe he shouldn't have. They're high IQ players. Caleb First, busts his ass on this team and is a very smart player. So I have the utmost confidence, that they're going to continue to, do better than not. They've won a lot of close games this year. Matt Painter said it several times. We lift these guys up as the number one team in the country, and Matt Painter's a genius. Of course, he's a great coach, but they've won so many games by the skin of their teeth too, that would change your perception on how this season's gone. Now we're all getting kind of like fat cats and we want to get spoiled here and just win out the season. That's not, that would have been great, but it's also, unfair to expect it. Yeah, you want it, but to expect it is going a bit too far. So that's okay. They slipped on the banana peel today. It doesn't change what their trajectory is for the rest of the season and in March. They're still one of the best teams in the country. If we look around the Big Ten or even just the national landscape, Arizona lost to a 10-14 team, right? I think it was Arizona that lost, or Tennessee, one of the two.
Arizona, Arizona and Tennessee both lost.
And Arizona, if I wasn't this diehard Purdue fan, I'd be picking Arizona to win the national championship. I think they're a great team. They lost to Oklahoma or Stanford. A 10-14 team. Purdue hasn't lost to the likes of that. And
Arizona, the difference is Arizona on their best day is a national champion. Arizona on their worst day loses in the first round.
And that's what I mean. So, and it's no guarantee. It's no guarantee Purdue's going to get to the Final Four or win a national championship. They're in a great spot because they're one of the better teams in the country. And you've got these teams. Tennessee's lost on back-to-back buzzer beaters against very lesser opponents. Dagger threes. Arizona loses to Stanford. They're a very talented team. Purdue has lost to Rutgers. They've lost to IU, and now they've lost to Northwestern, who's going to be in the top 25 when the polls come out on Monday morning. They will be.
No.
Mark it down. They're gonna be.
They will not be.
They're gonna be 24th. What are they right now, Joe? Craig's arguing with me. They're gonna be top 25 in the country.
I don't.
Shut up, Joe. But... Now Joe's gone. Joe's out. But Michael, you're on deck here. Okay, maybe I've had a bit too much Fireball, but to me,
Yeah, no kidding.
Northwestern is. I think very highly of Northwestern.
I think the thing
they're
I'm
good.
most concerned about today is the fact that you're drinking Fireball, Greg.
Yeah, well,
that's disgusting.
The crown's only going to get me going so much, but the Fireball is what really gets you amped up. So
yeah, I think quickly
ahead,
just,
Joe.
and then I know we want to, you want to touch on Newman. Like when I looked at the Northwestern Maryland game, like if I was in my head envisioning, I thought Northwestern was going to be a close win, and then I thought Maryland was going to be a loss, like just straight up. Now that the loss is here, like maybe it'll be interesting to see how they come out. I think if they get refocused, they probably take care of Maryland now, or maybe not probably, but we'll have a better chance to. You still split, with 3 of your last 4 games at home and still in a good spot overall.
Yeah, and that's my point. Maybe Northwestern isn't in the top. Maybe I got over myself.
They're a tournament team. I agree with that.
They're a tournament team.
They're probably
one
of
of the top, like Craig said, one of the top defensive teams ranked in the country. They've been a tough play for every team in the Big Ten. They have not lost a game this year where you're like, that's a really bad loss. Arizona just lost to a 10-win Stanford team. So they have not had that on their resume yet. Now, none of this means they can't blow it in March like Purdue fans are always, anticipating, because they're hoping, or not hoping, but they're, setting themselves up for the worst. But at the same time, I just think it still sets up for them very nicely to win the Big Ten. It still sets up for them nicely come March, because there isn't the Gonzaga, the Duke, the Kentucky, the Kansas, or one of these teams that feels like they're just so unbeatable. Purdue is one of those upper echelon teams. And if you look at down the list, probably one of the most consistent teams of those top 10 teams in the country. So I feel good about where Purdue stands. We're wrapping up here. We're getting to the final end of this show, because I think everybody wants to get to their food and drinks while they enjoy the Super Bowl here coming up in just a little bit. But I did want to talk about Brandon Newman because, we always mess around, with our Bitcoin is freedom guy that is a big supporter of what we do in this show. And he's always defending Brandon Newman as if he's his child, and that's fine. But today, I thought Brandon Newman had his stat line wouldn't show it. 0 points, 0 of 3 from the field, 0 of 3 from the 3-point line, 2 rebounds, 1 assist, 2 fouls in 22 minutes of play. Now a couple of those threes were big ones, and he was wide open and could have knocked him down. They just rimmed out, and I felt terrible for him, because I thought today was one of Brandon Newman's best games of the year. And if he puts that kind of effort out, because he bailed out Ethan Morton in a lot of ways, who was in foul trouble, and Brandon was able to come in and really lock up guys at times, fighting through screens, fighting for, rebounds and just doing the things that are winning plays. And he made a lot of right reads where he could have easily jacked up a shot, and instead, made the right pass that opened up a better shot for David Jenkins in the corner. And at the end of the day, the shots didn't fall, but they were the right plays. And we always hear Matt Painter talk about process over results. And I guarantee when they look back in the film room, they're going to be giving Brandon Newman a lot of credit for having a great process to his approach in this game today. I don't know who wants to start it. Go ahead, whoever.
Yeah, I can take it. Craig, if you want to jump in on the comment we just saw, but just real quick on Newman. Real quick, I agree. It's funny, he did kind of the opposite of the typical Newman game, which is normally he hits his open threes and does none of the little stuff. Today he did all of the little stuff and missed 2-3 huge open threes. But a good baby steps, right? I mean, it's coming from really a pretty low place with him. So keep climbing, keep putting, decent performances together, stuff where you have good process together, and hopefully then you get to that point where you can really impact the game, we win, hopefully.
And David Jenkins said it. For him, it started on the defensive end where he started to get extended minutes. And Brandon has been, by all intents and purposes, a great defender this year for the most part. He's had 1 or 2 lapses on the defensive end, but I think most of his mishaps come on the offensive end. but defensively, he was locked down today. And that's going to be why he gets 22 minutes on the court, which is going to open him up for more opportunities to take shots. And when he doesn't force it, he all of a sudden becomes a weapon for this team. Those shots will eventually fall. And then once they do, then his confidence will build up on the offensive end. But as long as it doesn't affect his defensive play, he's going to continue to get those minutes. Do we want to talk about this? Because I don't know if it's hearsay, at this point.
I don't. No, until we see some
we know.
proof. Yeah, I don't think we need to talk about
rumors
it.
going around on Reddit, which you can take with a grain of salt, that there may or may not have been, a player involved with the fans.
But again, I saw immediately after the game, I saw multiple people tweet that it was a bad situation. That like Northwestern did not have security set up correctly to keep fans off the court until the players got off. So that needs to be kept in mind. Whatever comes out, we saw multiple people tweeting that it was a mess and that the fans got on the court before the players got to get off the court. And that's never a good situation. We've seen that in basketball. We've seen that in tennis. We've seen it in other situations where like you've got to control security for your own house. So
okay, so
I don't know what Mason did.
Right, and this is conjecture, but this is from Steve Greenberg, who's a sports columnist for the Chicago Sun-Times, certainly a credentialed reporter and someone with merit. He said multiple Purdue players, including Mason Gillis, got caught up in the court storming at Northwestern. It looked dangerous from above, and Gillis had to fight his way out. Hard shoves at the least, but looked like he had to do it. Really poor job by Northwestern of preparing for the rush.
Right.
So that's from Steve Greenberg from the Sun-Times. And that's kind of the word getting around, but you hope that it isn't something that affects, Mason Gillis, a potential to play in games going forward. And, overall, court stormings are a part of college basketball tradition. Messed with IU fans when it came to this stuff when IU did it, but it was more about the significance of the rivalry and less about should they do it as fans having fun. And I like court storms, but when they are organized properly, and I felt IU did a great job of separating the players from the fans, that's a better circumstance.
You've got to have security set up around those teams. Like those players have to be protected. And I mean, we can go back, what was that, 20 years ago where Steffi Graf or whoever, like somebody rushed the tennis court after a tennis match and stabbed her. Like, I mean, you never know what's going on there. So like you have to protect the players. You have to.
Right.
Because you never know what kind of crazy is out there.
Yep. Agreed. So let's just hope that nothing else comes from this other than a learning lesson for Northwestern's staff at their facilities. But apart from that, we passed the hour and a half mark. We could talk all day about different people. I thought Trey Kaufman-Renn looked solid in the first half. But I just think overall we got Super Bowl Sunday here approaching, and we've gone long enough. We have more games to go. We can lick our wounds in peace on our couch while we enjoy this game.
Before you sign off,
you can give final thoughts.
No, a couple of people corrected me in the chat. It was Monica Seles, not Steffi Graf, on that the whole tennis deal. So, yeah, but like you don't know. I mean, you don't know who's coming at you. When people come over the court, you don't know what's coming at you. You got to be careful about that shit.
All right. Well, Kraig, you're always very good with your words. I'm always all over the map. You give 10 thoughts on your Boiler Diehards Facebook group.
Wait, are you giving me the Midwestern goodbye?
I'm going to let you give the final thoughts, and then I will thank our sponsors, and I'll give the Midwestern goodbye. Thank you very much. But why don't you just send us off with your final thoughts, and then I'll try my best to keep everything I say short and sweet as we end today's show.
Yeah, so the one thing I would say is, like, let's keep this in perspective. When we came into the beginning of the year, we were hoping we are a top 4 or top 5 in the Big Ten team. Okay. After today's loss, we're hoping we're a top 4 or top 5 team in the country. A loss away at Northwestern is not something that we ever expect, but Northwestern is pretty damn good this year, and that's something that you just have to understand. They're a really elite defensive team. We went up there. Northwestern asserted their will on us in terms of a defensive standpoint, and they came away with the win. But let's just keep things in perspective, Boilers. There's still a really good chance we're going to be a number 1 seed, even with this loss. Chance we could even lose one more and still be a number 1 seed. So let's just dial back a little bit. This team is still really good. They got some things to figure out, and we're all going to be okay going forward.
You promise? Because that one hurt. That one hurt.
I promise, Greg. Do one more shot of Fireball, and everything will be okay.
If I had it nearby, I'd take another rip. But instead, I'm going to thank our sponsors one last time. Our guys over at FanBags, the official supplier for professional cornhole boards and bags. Go ahead and hit them up at www.fanbagscornhole.com. Use the promo code BRAGS for 10% off. They are some of the best bags in the business. You'll see them on the professional circuit, like when you're watching them throw cornhole on ESPN. They sponsor some of the best throwers in the country and even the world. Also want to shout out our guys over at Shire Insurance and Auto Owners Insurance. Call 219-663-7274 for Shire Insurance Services, or visit www.shireinsurance.com for all of your insurance needs. And finally, our guys over at Mad Mushroom just started a partnership up with them here in the last couple days. Starting tomorrow, any order you make at Mad Mushroom Pizza, use the promo code BITS, for Boilers in the Stands. Use the promo code BITS for 15% off any order you make. Excited to have those guys on board, helping us out with what we're trying to do here. So that wraps things up. Kraig did a phenomenal job with his final thoughts. I am wrapping it up so I can go hit the couch, eat some prime rib, enjoy this Super Bowl.
Drink you again for Fireball.
Yeah, thank you again for everybody tuning in. If you're tuned in this long, especially for the guys on YouTube, we didn't remind people as much today, but that's okay. Please hit that like button on the show, even if you didn't like the outcome of the game. Follow us on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook. Search Brags in the Stands for our Boilers in the Stands shows. And, we're on Spotify and Apple for those of you that want to listen back on audio. But if you've tuned in this long, you've obviously done one or the other. So thank you again for everybody tuning in. Enjoy the Super Bowl. We'll be back next week. Maybe some interviews before the next game, but post-game shows after every game. And make sure you always boiler up. Let's go, Lawyer. One, two, three.